Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Mittrich, the alternate story, and I'm here today with my wife, Alana.
Hi.
And we're going to discuss Season 2 of The Man in the High Castle. But before we begin, as we're recording this Thoughts On, we learned that Carrie Fisher, the actress who played Princess Leia, has passed away. Not in the best mood to do this.
We're all a little shocked.
We're all a little shocked and saddened.
We're rooting for her.
But we're trying to stay busy instead of being sad and just get through this year, hopefully, in one piece. So,
Well, I think I want to read the quote that your brother sent us because I think that was like a great quote to talk about her. He sent us a quote by Yoda that said, "Death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those who transform into the Force. Mourn them, do not. Miss them, do not."
Very, very nice words. All I gotta say is, long live the rebellion. Okay, now that we're done being sad, let's
Talk about another rebellion a little bit.
let's talk about something a little darker. Let's talk about Season 2 of The Man in the High Castle. All right, so...
Wait, this is spoiler filled.
Oh, very spoiler filled, so we're going to spoil the shit out of this.
We're just going to talk, so if you haven't finished, then you might want to wait.
Yeah, so anywho, Man in the High Castle 2 takes off pretty much right at the end of Season 1. Joe is on the boat, and Juliana has just betrayed the resistance, and a lot of other stuff is happening. And also, too, I think in the first episode they mentioned that the events of the last season were just 2 weeks, which I thought was, really? That was 2 weeks' time? But I guess it's technically true. A lot happened in those 2 weeks, and a lot continues to happen with our characters.
I'd be exhausted. Like, no one sleeps?
Well, I guess we do. Some people do. So quick rundown of everything that happens. So Joe is on the boat, and he's about to get betrayed by the people because, turns out he's the resistance knows he's a Nazi, but he ends up talking to the people on the boat, and they convince him that he's going to turn the boat over, he's going to turn the film he has over to the Nazis, but they'll pay them for, his delivery. And they do, but it turns out to be a bomb, and they get blown up, but Joe gets back. He ends up going to Berlin based on his father's request. They hinted at in the last season that Joe had a father who was a high-ranking Nazi. We find out that this, what was his last name? Hausmann? Let's just say Hausmann. He's the Reichsminister. He's very high up in the Nazi high command. And so a lot of Joe's story is him in Berlin, learning about himself, learning about his family and everything like that. I can't remember what the exact term was. I probably should have wrote it down. But Joe finds out that he actually was born in this Nazi genetics birthing plan.
To make perfect babies.
Lugenborn or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And that makes him, because he even says that I'm this type of born, I'm this.
Yeah. So it's supposed to, there was some plan from like the 40s or something like that where it was supposed to make the perfect the next evolution of humanity, the perfect Aryan, and Joe's part of that, and he ends up coming to terms with that.
I don't know, he does look pretty perfect to me, I'm just saying.
Really? You like the actor who plays Joe
Blake?
I
think he's good looking, and I think he speaks well. I think you can always understand what he's saying, and I think he's not sore in the eyes.
Okay. So that's a lot of the story right there for Joe. Juliana, meanwhile, has to deal with the fallout for saving Joe instead of herself, and instead of taking out Joe. The resistance takes her to the Man in the High Castle, the actual person, and so he meets him, and she puts him on her storyline by asking her if she's seen this man, because that she saw in the last film she saw when we saw San Francisco blown up. Apparently, this man, and every other film where San Francisco is destroyed, he dies in San Francisco, but there's one film where he dies in an alley in New York in a Nazi uniform, and that's where there's no war and everyone's saved. And so Juliana is almost killed by the resistance, even though she was supposed to be let go, but then Juliana decides that she's going to find this guy, and she soon discovers that the guy is actually Trudy's real father. So Juliana...
Yes, her mom got a little frisky back in the
day. Mom apparently got around a lot, and the same unit too, surprisingly.
Yeah, they're all buddies. So Juliana's father was friends,
and her stepfather
was also friends with this man. What is this guy's name?
Is it Hank? I really should be writing things down.
We are terrible people.
We are terrible at these kind of stuff. Anywho, so she defects to the Nazi side. Where she ends up running into John Smith, and I'll get to him. But so she also runs and tracks down George Dixon, who's the name of the person she.
There we go. Right, is that it?
Well, that's the name of Trudy's father. I thought you meant the stepfather.
No, I was talking about Trudy's father.
Oh no, Trudy's actual real father
is George
Dixon.
That's I was like G. It started with G.
And George, pretty much says the resistance want her dead, but if they work with her, hopefully, that she might survive, and they want her to spy on the Smiths. So John Smith, meanwhile, he stopped Heydrich from launching his coup against Hitler. So he goes eventually to Berlin to personally deliver the film they got to Hitler. Hitler says, you got to find the man in the high castle. Meanwhile, John's also dealing with the fact that his son is still very sick. There was that doctor character who, told John, just quietly kill him in your home, because if you don't, I'm going to have to report it. And when John refuses to do it, the doctor threatens him, saying, I'm going to have to do this because I don't want to ruin my own life for this. And so John kills him and then has to cover up. And so you're watching him do this balancing act where he's trying to track down the film and also try to save his son. And also deal with, internal Nazi politics, because Hitler is dying. I mean, everybody dies, but he actually is dying in this timeline. He's close to death. And at one point he goes into a coma, and it seems like the whole world is about ready to go to war. So let's move back over to San Francisco. Mr. Tagomi, he tried to save his country by making sure Japan had nuclear weapons to have parity, but now it looks like there's factions even within Japan that wants to just who thinks a war is coming and war is inevitable, so they might as well strike first, and so they want to use a nuclear weapon first. In his kind of depression, Tagomi continues to go over to the other timeline, because in the season 1 we saw him jump over to our 1960s, and so now he keeps doing it. And at one point he stays even there for a long period of time and runs into his wife, who I think is dead in his timeline but is alive in our 1960s. And he soon discovers that his doppelganger wasn't very nice. It was not the Tagomi that we know of. And Tagomi has to deal with that, where he tries to fit himself into his family,
or hate him.
which includes Juliana, who married apparently Tagomi's son, and they had a grandchild, and so that's so that it kind of explains why Tagomi felt a connection with Juliana in his timeline versus the timeline of ours.
He was very nice to her.
Yeah. So that's something interesting too. And so and during the time he's in there is also during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which sort of there's that whole parallel between the coming war between Nazi Germany and Japan in the alternate timeline versus the Cuban Missile Crisis, the coming war between the Soviet Union and the United States in our timeline. Meanwhile, Frank is becoming involved in the resistance. He even saves, and I know he has a character's name, but I keep calling him DJ Quails because I just like that name. He saves DJ by working with the Yakuza. He in the season 1 he ended up making that forgery with Childen and selling it. So he mentions he confesses to the Yakuza that this was a fake, but he'll help them make more fakes and make money, and that helps them put pressure on the Kempeitai to get the DJ Quails out. And so they are now working with Childen to make fakes for the Yakuza, but at the same time Frank is also becoming more and more involved with the resistance because he wants to strike back, he wants to fight back against the occupiers. And so he has this sort of weird relationship with Childen, who feels like he just wants this to be over with, but has no choice to work with these guys. And then finally we got Inspector General. Was his name Keto? I want to say Keto. Yeah, I think it's it. So I'm just going to call it Inspector General. He also has an even larger role, and it's a lot more sympathetic in my feeling, because even though he is sort of this really brutal guy who doesn't really have much respect for human life, at the same time he also loves his country and doesn't want a war either. And so he's playing all these different sides, and at the same time he's really is trying to stop more people from dying. And you get some good moments for him where especially when you see him compared to this general character who shows up from Chan, who wants there to be an actual war. You see the fact that you have this person that the Inspector General actually seemed to have admired at first, but then as time goes on, you see him start losing his faith in everything. And he even ends up working with John Smith to figure out some way out of this coming war. So that's the general story. I kind of left out a little bit because I'm sure we'll talk about some of it, but that's some pretty big deals. I guess we'll hit the ending later in our little podcast. But Alana, what do you think of it? What do you think of season 2?
At first, the first couple episodes, I was a little bored.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was just because there was more talking and they're reminding of us what happened in the first, and they were trying to just show the outcomes of what happened at the end of the first season. But as it went on, it got better. Mm-hmm. It got more action packed. It got more interesting. It got more twisty and turny, I personally enjoyed Juliana's storyline the best. And I don't know, I just like her the best. I find her interesting. I find it very, I mentioned this to you when we were watching it, her mannerisms are interesting to me. If you ever noticed, like, anytime she lets someone into a door or something like that, she always kind of bows her head a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's come from, like, the San Francisco area.
Pacific States.
You know, and I just found that whole, like, I just find it interesting in how she has kind of adapted those mannerisms of the Japanese culture. And so, and she was into, you know, Japanese form of fighting.
Judo, I think it was.
Yeah, and things like that. So, I just found that interesting how interested she was in that area. And then, I just like her storyline, and I thought it was very interesting how she befriends the Smiths and their friends and gains their trust, including their son's trust. I almost thought he had a little crush on her a little bit.
I think that's kind of what they were going for, but it wasn't played up that much, but I think that's kind of what they were trying for.
Yeah.
That he was having kind of a crush on her, because earlier you saw him, like, sort of seeming crushing on this girl at school, but then when she, you know, decided to go out to a dance with somebody else, you started seeing him kind of wanting to be around Juliana more.
Yeah.
So even though the age difference was a little different.
Yeah, he wasn't getting any.
No,
I'm just saying.
And he didn't get any at the end, because he eventually does find out about his sickness. His parents try to keep it from him, but then, you know, again, spoiler, this is a little bit at the end, he ends up telling the government about his sickness, and they come, and he willingly goes to his death, and showing you sort of like the side of the whole, like, that whole side of, you know, trying to, you know, getting rid of useless eaters, as they always refer to it in the show. It's like,
well, and I just think, like,
it's always for, yeah, it's like, those people who need to get exterminated are always someone else. It's never your own family, and it sort of shows you that big issue, that issue, you know, that even today sometimes pops up. You know, it's like, I'm not going to go into too many politics right now. 2016 has had enough of it, but but it shows you just how awful that whole ideology really is. That whole idea that some people are just useless and should be taken care of. It's just. And especially when you teach someone that and constantly pounding at them from the day of their birth, and to the point when they realize that they are one of those people,
it breaks your heart.
But it also explains why he, you know, willingly went to his death, because he honestly really believed that was
duty.
right.
It was his duty to do that, and you know, I just find it such irony and all that. With
it is.
It's like you and your family agree so much with this culture you live in, and you support it, and you salute your leader, and you see nothing wrong with it, and you just accept until it's your own, and then you're like, oh,
and then
shit.
Suddenly you realize
might not be a good idea.
What has this state given me other than just taking something away from me?
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm interested to see, especially how his mother handles this next season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Because you know, I guess we can talk a little bit more about the ending. The war is avoided, and it all comes, you know, a lot of different characters kind of like pull through it. Tagomi eventually decides that he really can't spend any more time in our timeline, that he realized that, you know, he starts to learn that he goes there and learns some lessons about, you know, life and about taking responsibility, and he realizes that he can't just stay here in this other world. So he ends up taking a film of the America exploding an H-bomb in Bikini Atoll, and he takes it back to his timeline, and he gets the Inspector General, and he says, like, here's what, you know, they come up with a plan. It says, like, this is a bomb that's being exploded in Japanese territory. We're going to show, we can say that this is something, this is ours. And so the Inspector General takes it to John Smith, and John Smith takes it to the new Fuhrer, which is Houseman, which is Joe Blake's father. And we also find out that Houseman was actually the man behind the coup from the first season, but that he was playing everybody, as, you know, using Hydra just to deflect attention to what he was trying to do, and he was trying to instigate a war. And when he sees when he's presented with the fact they have this nuclear bomb, suddenly everybody is like, wait, we were expecting to go to war, and we're the only nuclear power. Now suddenly it doesn't seem like it's going to be that easy of war. And Houseman almost takes care of it, except Smith also then talks to Himmler, the head of the SS, and shows him, like, hey, look, this is the guy who was behind the coup attempt. This is the guy who probably did kill the Fuhrer, and so Houseman's arrested before the war could be started. It's sort of like the Cuban Missile Crisis in an Axis victory timeline. It's really the parallel they were going for, and I thought they did an okay job. In general, my opinion of this season. I actually kind of liked it better than the first season. My big issue with the first season is that there was just the middle of it was kind of boring. It had a strong beginning and a strong end, but the middle was sort of boring. I felt like this one kept my attention all the way through, and I like that. I mean, I still don't buy the whole Japan wouldn't have nuclear weapons and would need information from Germany to do it. Just because, I mean, the knowledge of how to make a nuclear bomb existed before the war actually started. It was it was there, and Japan was working on it during the war, and I would assume that in a world where they one day would continue working on it. I just don't buy it. I really don't. If the Soviet Union and China from our timeline can get a nuclear bomb, then so could the 1960s Japan, who controls every single country around the Pacific Ocean. So yeah, it was a little silly for me, but I made my peace with that. It's over now, moving on. But anyway, I thought he did a good job. I think even they brought the show closer to the book, because the book was always had this, like, one of the central themes of the book was just like, what is reality? It had a lot of characters questioning reality, and you kind of saw that now. It was a lot more surreal. It was a lot more mind trippy, especially with the parts where Tagomi going to our timeline. And so you have this guy who's dealing with this sort of like world where his country didn't win, and yet sometimes he seems happy about it, and other times he doesn't like it at all. Like at one point where he's like getting groceries with his son, his son was saying something and upsetting him, and his son was like, "I'm an American," and Tagomi says in Japanese, "No, you're Japanese," and his son was like, "I can be both. I'm in a world where I can be both American and Japanese." And I thought that was a pretty powerful thing for Tagomi to hear, because he came from a world where he's Japanese, and
that's it.
That's great. That's awesome. And there's these Americans who aren't allowed to be American. And so now he suddenly finds that here in this country, his son can be Japanese and be American. He can be both. He doesn't have to be one or the other. One is not necessarily better than the other, but doesn't matter, because you can be both.
Well, and he married an American woman, so now their child definitely is American and Japanese and doesn't have to choose sides.
Well,
that baby.
If only 2016 America
allowed
you. You would think that in a world where you might be more than one race, that you'd be accepted by everybody. But no, it seems like that's the opposite.
I'm asking for perfection here. I know. I'm just too nice of a person. Well, can I talk about some of the things that, like, okay, so I'm a home ec major. That's my degree. That's what my master's is working on towards. That's what I do. So I found the whole thing fascinating when you look at the clothes that the Smith family and the German side of the country are wearing, because they're very late 40s or 1950s style. Flared out dresses with cinch waists, pearls and hairstyles, the curls in the front, and pocketbooks and gloves, and even their style of their house and their kitchen and the appliances there, playing bridge, the ladies sitting and playing bridge and things like that. It's just very 50s. Mm-hmm. And so I just find that whole thing to be very fascinating to me when this is supposed to be a 1960s time period. Mm-hmm. And you see some more 60s style stuff on the Japan side, as if they're a little bit ahead of the other side of the country. And definitely when Tagomi does a flashback or goes to the other timeline, those, you could say there is definitely a difference in those style of clothing compared to the German clothing. Right. So when Tagomi's in that flashback, or not flashback, I keep saying flashback, when he's in that timeline,
our timeline, that's
the correct clothing for the period that the whole show is based on. And so it's just fascinating to me. And even when Joe is in Berlin, the girl that he meets, them wearing pants, and like when they were at that party and stuff, the clothing that those people are wearing in Berlin are more 1960s. It almost just feels like this New York area, this side of the country, they're stuck in this 40s, 50s style.
I think that's kind of was intentional from the show. I'm going to get political, but a lot of conservatives tend to look pretty kindly on the 1950s, even though it wasn't that great of a decade, despite what our nostalgia goggles sometimes say it was. And when you have such an extreme right-wing ideology like Nazism, you can see them sort of putting the brakes on any sort of like changes to culture and stuff like that. Like,
agreed.
You bring up you bring up Nazi Germany, but you bring up those kids, and they tend to be from the very wealthy elites of the Reich, and so they kind of have the freedom, for lack of a better term, to sort of be a little rebellious, to sort of do whatever they want, whether it's to do drugs and have orgies, and which we do see.
Yep.
And even too that they even were environmentalists. I thought was kind of interesting as well. And it was like, oh, liberal Nazis. That's funny.
Yeah.
But it's kind of true. I mean, like, America in this world is kind of a backwater. It's not the center, so you can see why culture and society might be slow moving, while in places like Berlin, which is the center of all the power and influence of the world, things might be a little faster and a little bit more looser and stuff like that. But I think that was intentional. I think they were trying to, I think by showing a 1960s America that was stuck in the 50s, I think it was trying to show, like, you know, there's people right now out there who want this, who want this society sort of, you know, who not only want to pause society but also roll it back a little bit, and you kind of, so I think that was intentional for them, pushing the 50s kind of look and stuff. I mean,
based on just what my degree is, and I just found it all fascinating that's the route they chose, the clothing they chose, the look they chose,
right,
the appliances in the kitchen that they chose. I mean, it was definitely really meticulously thought about how that was going to look, and they nailed it. They definitely, if that's the look they were going for, 1950s, they nailed it.
I also thought it was interesting, a little thing they did too, where Tagomi, when he returns back to his timeline, he confronts his assistant, because he noticed earlier in the season his assistant had some odd scars on his wrists, and eventually Tagomi looks and sees those same scars on someone who survived a nuclear bombing from our timeline, and he says, like, you're not from this timeline, and the assistant's like, no, I'm not. I lost my family in the attacks on, I think it was either Hiroshima. I think it was Hiroshima. And I was just so upset. I didn't know what to do. And suddenly I find myself in this timeline where my city and my family and everything is fine, and I'm happy. And I find that interesting, because a lot of people like call this as a dystopia, and it is. But a good dystopia has these moments where it's like, it has, what's the word I'm looking for? It has something that makes you want to stay. And I feel like, you know, for this guy who lives in what we would consider dystopia, for this, the Tagomi's assistant, for him it's our timeline is a dystopia. Our timeline is a dystopia where the city was destroyed and everyone he loved and cared about is gone. They're here now in this world. So from his personal viewpoint, this is the better timeline. The timeline he's from is the dystopia.
So here's my question. When Tagomi or this guy are in different timelines, where is their doppelganger?
Well, I think that because Juliana, the alternate timeline Juliana, mentioned that, you know, there was a big fight and to alternate Tagomi, this is going to get confusing. Okay, Tagomi 1 is the one from The Man in the High Castle. Tagomi 2 is our timeline. She mentions there was a big fight in Tagomi 2. It stormed out and it was foggy and he went to a bridge and she couldn't find him. And I think it's heavily implied that he killed himself or else died.
Okay.
So that's why, you know, there wasn't a Tagomi 2 didn't show up and Tagomi 1 appeared. And,
it was like, oh shit.
Yeah. And I did like how Tagomi 1 was like, you know, I don't know, I thought there was a big issue involving Tagomi's storyline. It was the fact that it seemed like he was gone for several days, but there was never any major deal made of it. No one's like, where the fuck is the trade minister? Where is the most powerful man in the Pacific States? No one seemed to care until the moment he returned. And then it's like, hey, where were you?
Well, then my question is, in that timeline that he disappeared from, did a few seconds go by or did days go by?
I think time moved on at a pace, so that every time a day passed as well. I don't think there was too much time difference. Although it did seem like occasionally, like, he would go when it was dark. He would travel from his office when it was dark, and then he would show up in the morning and it would be light out. So maybe the timelines weren't synced completely, which is a possibility, or maybe that was just bad writing or bad directing. I have no idea. But we're getting near the end of our little recording, so again, I'm going to do some final thoughts. Elena, anything else you want to say about season 2?
I mean, I'm excited for them to even do the next season. We haven't even looked up when it's coming out yet, but,
or if it's coming out.
Yeah, right. I mean,
I don't think it's been official season 3 yet.
Oh no, don't tell me that. You make me cry. I enjoyed it. I had a good time watching it. I would look forward to see what happens next. And so I'm waiting to see what happens next. I hope they continue it. I'd be really sad if they didn't.
Like I said, I enjoyed it. It had it was just, I think, a stronger story overall than the first season. And I liked how they got a little bit more into the ideas, alternate timelines and alternate histories. That said, I mean, it still isn't perfect. There were still moments where it was like, really? And again, since it's also built on the underlying just kind of like the suspension of disbelief about Japan's technical prowess, advancement, whatever you want to call it, it still sort of rubs me the wrong way. But at the same time, I mean, whatever. It's still entertaining to me. I still think it's probably one of the better alternate history shows I've seen in a while, especially because Elena and I have become a become a little bored on Timeless, hence why we haven't done any more Timeless episodes.
It's the same show over and over and over.
Well, if we
time period.
if we ever do an episode on it, we'll talk more about that. But otherwise, yeah, I think I can recommend it. So yeah, I think that's all we got to say.
Yep. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. God, can't wait for 2016 to end. So with that said, I'm at Mitrich, the alternate historian. This is Elena.
Hi, bye.
Hi, bye, indeed. We're the alternate historians. And I'll see you guys in 2017. Bye.